today?
It did move today.
Okay, so welcome everyone. We are so pleased to have you here today for our virtual education presentation on clinical trials. And we are so pleased today to have a guest speaker with us, Jill MacPhee. So Jill holds the position of Director of Clinical Operations at the Kawartha Centre, located here in Peterborough on Brock Street. And she has been with the Kawartha Centre since 2009. Jill holds a master's in science degree in occupational therapy and is a certified clinical research professional. She has many years of experience in working in geriatric health. And Jill is also a research coordinator with extensive experience conducting neurocognitive assessments. Jill provides consulting expertise in the areas of protocol development and patient and care partner advocacy. So we are so pleased to have you here today, Jill, to join us to talk about clinical trials and research happening at the Kawartha Centre. So we want to welcome you. We want to welcome John, who's with you today, and I know you're going to introduce John in a little bit, but we'll turn it over to you to get us started today. Welcome.
Thank you, Shelby. Thank you for asking me to present on what I think is a very important topic. And as you mentioned, I'm not able to advance my slide. There we go. I have with me a very special guest today, John Peters. So he's sharing the screen with me here. And John is going to be helping me with the presentation. And when we get to that portion, I'm going to give more of a formal introduction of John. So clinical drug trials. So I just want to start by saying that I don't want to make any assumptions, but I think a lot of times when people think of research and drug trials and international drug trials, they probably think, when they're thinking Canadian terms, they're probably thinking that a lot of these things are done in Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa. And I think there's a lot of people that don't know that we actually have a clinical trial site for Alzheimer's drugs right here in Peterborough. It's unusual to have one in a city this size that is participating in such large international drug trials. So I'm really excited to share that with the group today and tell them a little bit about what's going on in this area right now. So you saw on the first screen, our official formal name is Kawartha Centre Redefining Healthy Aging. But people who haven't heard of that may know us more as the Memory Clinic. We were known as the Kawartha Memory Clinic for many, many years, and we rebranded in 2017. A lot of people associate the clinic with Dr. Ingram. She was the founder of the clinic back many years ago. But we're currently located at 168 Brock Street, so we're across from the Fresh Co. And our tagline is that we're redefining healthy aging for those with memory loss, dementia, and related challenges. So back when Dr. Ingram started this clinic, there was just her and a nurse and a receptionist, but now we have 5 geriatricians. We're so fortunate for a city this size to have such a large amount of specialists. And we have a large multidisciplinary staff that are highly trained in geriatric care. And the clinic itself, we do memory assessments and consultation for people who have concerns about their memory, and then work on diagnosis and treatment. We are a mentor site for Queen's University for medical residents and for Trent School of Nursing. But what I'm really here to talk about today is that we are an international research site for drug trials for cognitive impairment since the early 2000s. And to give us a little bit of a pat on the back, we are part of a consortium called the Consortium of Canadian Centres for Clinical Cognitive Research, which has 27 sites across Canada that are participating in cognitive research. And we just accepted on Friday an Award of Excellence for the 2nd year in a row. So if I was standing in front of you in a room, one of the questions I would probably ask now are any of you taking any medications? And probably most of the audience would say that yes, that they are in fact taking medications. And every medication that we take, whether it's an over-the-counter Tylenol, whether it's something for blood pressure, whatever it is, those drugs had to go through rigorous clinical trials to become available to people for use, and people had to volunteer to try those medications. So with Alzheimer's disease, and I'm using the word Alzheimer's to cover a large scope of people, including people who don't even have any symptoms yet, and are going to develop the disease, through to people who have mild cognitive impairment, mild Alzheimer's disease, moderate, severe. So I'm using the word Alzheimer's broadly. But the first drug that was approved for this disease was in 1994, and that drug that was approved was discontinued shortly thereafter. And the drugs that we know today, like Aricept and Reminil and Exelon, that a lot of people are taking if they have mild or moderate Alzheimer's disease, they were approved in the late 1990s and in the early 2000s. And nothing has been approved in Canada since that time, despite there being hundreds of drugs that have been trialed. So I've been working here since 2009, as Shelby mentioned in the introduction. And you'll notice my picture is a picture of a puzzle. So when I first started working here, the way I would describe Alzheimer's drug research at that time was as if someone had taken a 1,000-piece puzzle, opened the box, and threw it on the table. And pieces were all over the place. There was nothing put together. And each year, you're starting to see the picture form. We've learned so much, and I'm using the royal term we in terms of the scientific community, but we've learned so much. The original drug trials that I was involved in was looking at trying to remove plaques in the brain. That's a known part of Alzheimer's disease. But they didn't have any way of determining if people had the plaques. So that would be like giving someone a medication for Alzheimer's disease or for blood pressure that didn't have high blood pressure. So those trials didn't work because they didn't have the right target population. So then they were able to really hone in and figure out, how do we determine who are the right people for the trials. Other thing that was figured out, that has been figured out, I shouldn't say figured out because we certainly don't have the final answer, but something that has developed is how complex this disease is in the brain and how many various things are happening. So we know that people are building up plaques of amyloid. We know that people are developing tangles of tau, both proteins that are naturally occurring in the body, but when you have Alzheimer's disease, they aren't doing what they're supposed to do. We know that there's inflammation developing in the brain. We know that the volume of the brain is changing, and every change is creating a change in something else. So there's been so much research into what is the target? Where should things be focused? We've also learned that these changes are happening long before anybody has any symptoms. So targeting someone who already is well advanced in the disease may not give them the help that they need because some of the damage may be hard to reverse. So we know we have to target people earlier. And I attended the Canadian Conference on Dementia last week. It was held in Toronto. It's a wonderful conference that's held every 2 years in a various city in Canada. And there was a lot of discussion about research and clinical trials. And one of the things that came out in every talk was that one treatment, it may not be enough. It may have to be a cocktail of treatments, looking at the various issues that are happening in the brain. And the other major learning over the past number of years with the trials that have happened is the side effect profiles and looking at research trials that are targeting one area may have more side effects than others, and how do we mitigate some of that? So every year, even though these drugs have not gotten approved and many drugs are quote unquote failures, there is no failure in clinical trial, because even if the drug doesn't work, it is contributing to science and learning many, many new things. So most of you have probably heard lots of things on the news in the last few months, really in the last year or two. We have hope for the first time in a long time in Alzheimer's drug trial research. We see lots of media about drugs that are getting approved, or drugs that are being fast-tracked through the regulatory agencies. And we right now are seeing the first drugs approved in the US by the FDA in almost 20 years. So that's exciting. It provides hope, but is it the final solution? Are we done? And my answer to that would be no, not even close. So we don't have these approvals in Canada yet. One of the drugs, Lecanemab or lecanemab, is in front of Health Canada right now, and it very well may get approval. But there are lots of logistics that have to get worked out in order for those drugs to get approved for the general public. There are a lot of side effects that have to be very closely monitored. There are some diagnostic tests that are currently not available for clinical use. They're only available in research. And the drugs that have been approved in the US and may get approved in Canada are also delivered through an IV on a regular basis. So we have lots of hope, but Canada still has to do, I shouldn't say Canada, internationally there's a lot of infrastructure work that has to happen for these drugs to get approved. And not only that, it's like any drug. If you look at blood pressure, for an example, and I use blood pressure for an example because a lot of people are on blood pressure medication, but you may go to the doctor and your blood pressure is high and they start you on Coversil. Well, it turns out that maybe that one isn't really working for you. It's not lowering your blood pressure like they thought it might. Or it's making it too low. So they switch you to amlodipine, and that may or may not work, and you might go through 2 or 3 medications before you get the right one. So it's not going to be any different for Alzheimer's disease. Certain people are going to react to certain medications in different ways. Many people will have contraindications to taking certain drugs. So although we have lots of hope, we are far from having a solution. So where are we now? So I don't expect anyone to be able to read this slide or read anything on the slide, but this was presented last week at the Canadian Conference on Dementia, and this is from June of 2023. And this is a graphic of how many drugs are being trialed right now for Alzheimer's disease. So it's a lot. So you'll see that some of those are looking at modifying the disease, so changing the course of action. Some is looking at symptoms, helping with some of the symptoms. Some of them are looking at boosting the your cognition. They all have a different, they're all slightly different, and they're all in various stages of development. So some of them are in phase 1, which means they're just trialing them right now in the lab or with animals. They're not even close to being ready to trialing them with humans yet, and a good majority of them make it that far. And then we see lots that are in the phase 2 and phase 3, and that's when people with the indication, the disease, are actually trialing the drugs. So why are we studying all these medications right now? Well, number one is we know that this disease can become quite devastating, and we don't have a cure. It's important to keep trialing medications because not every medication works for any one person. So we need to have multiple drugs that are available. We need to have drugs that are easily accessible. We need to have drugs that are affordable, and we need to have drugs that work. And as I mentioned before, every single clinical trial, even if the study fails, that's where we get the information to move the science forward and put a few more pieces in that puzzle that I alluded to earlier. So I guess part of this presentation is a call to action. So without clinical trials, there can be no better treatments, there can be no prevention, and therefore no cure for Alzheimer's disease. So right now, and this will kind of take you back to that big circle with all the words that I said no one was going to be able to read, but just to give you a graphic of how many drugs are being trialed. Currently in development right now, there are 143 drugs for Alzheimer's disease in the development pipeline. Now remember that when I use the word Alzheimer's disease here, I'm using it to say even people who haven't developed any symptoms yet, right through to further on down. So 143 drugs. So drugs that are looking at changing the disease itself to make changes in the brain so that the disease doesn't progress at the same rate is 83 of the drugs. 83% of the drugs are looking at that. So this is the important piece, is that the current trials looking at Alzheimer's disease and or pre-Alzheimer's disease will require 50,575 participants to donate almost 4 million weeks to clinical trials in total in order for a cure to be found. Okay, so that's where the call to action comes in. It's important for people to know that people do need to volunteer to trial these drugs, and we need to be able to move the science forward. So I'm going to wait. In a few minutes, we're going to talk to John a little bit more about Kawartha Centre and what we do here. But I do want to add, I spoke to a couple of individuals and their partners who are participating in some of our trials right now. And one gentleman and his wife yesterday, I spoke to them, and she was an avid volunteer throughout her life. She volunteered for many important causes, and she has now developed mild Alzheimer's disease, and she has been participating in a clinical trial here at Kawartha Centre for 3 years. And yesterday, as I was reviewing some new information with them, and I asked her why she participates in clinical trials, her automatic response, without any hesitation, was to help others. And it didn't even cross her mind in that moment to say to help herself. Later on, she said, and maybe it will help me. But that's where, you know, this is a call to action for people who want to move the science forward and help others. So I'm not going to get into the specific clinical trials that we're involved in here because there's a lot of inclusion and exclusion criteria. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the types of trials we have. But right now, we have a lot of clinical trials for people with a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment. We have we have quite a number of clinical trials for people with mild Alzheimer's disease and some for people with moderate Alzheimer's disease. And in the first quarter of 2024, we will be involved in what's called a preclinical trial. And that is very exciting because that's what we want, where we want to see the future of Alzheimer's disease going, is curing this before it starts. So looking at people who have the markers of developing this issue, but haven't actually developed it yet. So we're very excited to be participating in that program in the new year. Some of the medications that we are trying are IV infusions. Some of them are pills that you take every day. Some of them are once a day, some of them are twice a day. So it varies. And the visits can be as frequent as bi-weekly. We have multiple individuals who come in here every 2 weeks for an IV infusion. The majority are monthly, and that's what John participated in. And for the pills, the trial with pills, they eventually push out to every 3 months. So we try to work with the people's medical history and the medications they're taking and their lifestyle to figure out what's the best trial for them, because although this is extremely important, so is your quality of life. So we try to work around travel and all of those things. I also meant to mention earlier that the drugs that are getting approved in the US and are sitting in front of Health Canada, we were largely involved in all of those trials. So we have many participants. Actually, one of the trials that has been approved for a fast track, it hasn't been approved, but approved for a fast track, is a trial that John participated in. So we are one of the go-to sites for these international companies for drug trials. So we hear about it first here at Kawartha Centre. So participating in a clinical drug trial is not for everyone. And I'm going to say that I really feel the main reason to participate should be that the feeling of needing to contribute to science. And the reason I say that is most of the drug trials, you either get the real drug or you get a placebo. So a placebo is it looks the same, but there isn't any active medication. And we don't know, and the participants don't know if you're getting the real drug or the placebo. So it may not help you because you may be getting the placebo. And it also may not help you because it just may not be the right drug for you, and you don't know unless you try. So it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that it will help you in that way. It's also a commitment. It's regular visits to the clinic. The trials can be several years. And you need to be able to follow through on that, because if people drop out of the trials, if too many people drop out of the trials, then they don't get the data that they need to determine whether their medication is working or not. There's need to travel for diagnostic tests. So John will tell you a little bit about that in a few minutes, but we have to determine if the disease is in fact an Alzheimer's base. So they test for things like a buildup of amyloid in the brain or tau tangles. And one of the ways to do that is through PET scans. And the PET scan machine that's used is in Mississauga. Now, that being said, we can provide travel where someone picks you up and takes you there and waits for you and takes you back. So we do everything we can to make it easy, but it is a commitment. There are strict inclusion and exclusion criteria, so you may want to participate but not meet the criteria. And of course, every part of the research is that they're trying to determine the safety and the side effects. So there are possible side effects, and that is a risk. And lastly, there is a need for a significant commitment from someone who knows you well. So it's a trial for the individual who's receiving the drug, but we require them to have a care partner who knows them well, who can answer questions and help with the study. So those are some things to consider. But the benefits, and I'm going to say the benefits from my perspective, but John will be able to comment on that better than I can. But first, there's access. So access to multiple things. So you may get the real drug and you're getting access to something that's not available yet, not available to the general public. Access to these diagnostic tests so that can give evidence that it is in fact the disease that we think it is. You are also having regular blood work and physical exams. So we've had times where we've caught something very early in someone unrelated to memory issues that we were able to treat. And there's staff, and I think John will agree with this, there's staff that were readily available. So sometimes calling a doctor's office is not easy to get through to someone, but everybody that's in a clinical trial not only has our office phone numbers, but our cell phone numbers, and we try to make ourselves available all the time. And we certainly develop quite a relationship with the people who are participating. And then there's the part of being part of something big. This is a science that's moving forward quickly, not as quickly as anybody who is suffering from this disease would like. But it is moving forward, and to be part of every one person that participates in a clinical trial is a hero and part of something that's big. And although what's being trialed now may not or likely may not help the individual participating right now, but it's helping your children, your grandchildren, your future generations. And we had several people who have participated in trials that they just feel like they're doing something. So rather than sitting back while the disease progresses, they are feeling something special and just taking action and doing something about it. So those are some of the benefits that I have heard from trial participants over the years. So now I'm going to introduce you to my very, very special guest. So this is John. He's very special. So this is John Peters. So to give you a little bit about John's history, John has a master's degree in geography. And in his career, he managed land development to ensure the protection of historical and environmentally significant land threatened by urban and industrial development. John is now retired from paid employment, but he's a naturalist, and he continues to be involved in research involving breeding bird surveys and marsh monitoring. He's a curler, he's a reader, and an avid cross-country skier. What I find really interesting is he's also a certified wine judge and a member of the Wine Judges of Canada. He's a husband, he's a father, and he's a grandfather. And John suspects that both his father and his paternal grandmother had Alzheimer's dementia, but they were never officially diagnosed. So John himself was diagnosed with mild Alzheimer's in June of 2021, and he started his first clinical trial in October of 2021. So that particular trial that John participated in has come to a completion. So he's no longer receiving an IV infusion. But we have a new trial that's coming up very soon that John and I are both hoping that he will be able to participate in. So I am thrilled to have John here today because I have a real passion for what I do. I have a very strong family history of Alzheimer's disease and may very well go down this road myself. So I appreciate each and every individual who volunteers their time to test these drugs. But I'm also just passionate about what we do because I think it's very important work. I could talk all day about what we do and why I think it's good and why I think it's important, but I think that someone who has lived experience can probably explain them. I'm going to start this off, John, by asking you some questions, and you can tell me your thoughts on it. First off, I mentioned that you were diagnosed with Alzheimer's in June of 2021, and you received that diagnosis here at the clinic. So I'm just curious, first off, how did you hear about the Kawartha Centre?
Right. So I had been struggling as I retired and was noticing that I was losing my focus and I couldn't keep track of the things I was trying to do on a daily and weekly basis. And so I went to my own family doctor and had her just talk to me about this a little bit. And I said, is there something we can do to figure out what this is about and why, and can I get something to correct this problem? So I don't want to be going downhill. I want to plateau and enjoy my retirement. So she said, well, let's do some tests. And they gave me a series of the introductory tests, which are, different shapes and colors and patterns. And you just do a basic set of tests, which are easily done in the doctor's office. And then you find out that, well, you are a little bit confused here, there, and other things like that. And so she worked with me over about 3 months. And together we both realized that I needed some bigger picture. And I said, where can I go? Who can I ask about this? Because I don't want to just keep trying to figure out what it is, doing the same thing over and over again. And I got directed to the Kawartha Centre. Fortunately, I live about 45 minutes from here, and I can still drive comfortably. My wife can drive me if I don't feel comfortable. And so we came here and had an interview. And it took a while. We talked through it, and it was like, okay, here's some of the information. You go away and think about it, and come back next month, and we'll see if we have a deal that we can work out. Well, of course, I signed up right away because I have done a lot of research of my own over the years, and I was thrilled to get into something like this. And I said, it doesn't matter if it's a placebo to me. It's just getting this figured out. That's what I wanted. I wanted to see progress because I know there's some history in my family of this, and I'm sure that it may be really important for the next generation and the one after, because it is genetics to some extent.
Absolutely. So you touched on this a little bit, John, but what made you want to participate in research?
Well, research has been a big part of my life. I can't stand sitting still and watching things not go where they should go, when you know that there's opportunities and the world can change. I've done a lot of rare bird and other environmental problem research where we've tried to find solutions that will work for industrial companies and other people who are developing land. And we've made huge differences over many years by changing the way you do work. And this is no different. It's a matter of figuring out how to accommodate the complexity of the environment and the lifestyles we live in. So it's just the only way to do it. You have to try. Yeah.
So when we first talked about participating in clinical trials, what were some of the things that you were concerned about when you were thinking about participating?
Yeah, of course. There's first of all, for me, it's a commitment. I basically you're going to come every month for a long period of time. It's a day that you commit to it, especially if you have to drive a long way like I do. And it's a kind of well, I might get the drug, I might not, but I am going to learn something. And so as long as you have the patience and the time and willingness to give back to science and to enjoy the benefits of it, which from my perspective has been 100% over and over again. I've had no downsides to this. It's been a great way of contributing, but learning and potentially benefiting, obviously, in the near or soon down the road.
That's right.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your experience of being in a clinical trial.
Well, not everyone on the video here has been to the Kawartha Centre, but if you and when you come, you should come just for the entertainment value alone. This is not a doctor's office. This is a very warm, comforting, supportive place. You walk in and you feel like you walked into a restaurant that serves high-end food and offers chats and a comfortable place to sit while you're considering your future. It's really an interesting place to come, and it's a lovely, lovely building with beautiful artwork and painting. People's crafts and care in this place is really impressive. So I always enjoy my visits. It's something new comes every time. Either the people I meet who I've sat with who are getting their infusions, and I've chatted with them and got to know some of them over the years. There's just so much positivity here with the staff and with the space. It's really special.
I'd like to add to that when you say positivity about the staff. We have an interesting group of individuals here who everybody who is working here is not doing it as a job, they're doing it as a passion. And I do think that comes out.
You feel it, for sure. Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that there is some diagnostic tests that you have to travel for. So the MRI facility that does the MRIs for us is in Markham, and the PET scan facility is in Mississauga. I mentioned that we do offer driving services for anybody who needs or wants those. But John, you have chosen to drive yourself. So just tell me a little bit about your experience traveling for these MRIs and PETs and what that's been like for you.
It's a plan. You have to set time aside because you never. Well, I'm driving across the GTA in this situation because I live well north of the city and in a rural area. But it's doable, and I picked the times. I tried to always get a time that was midday, not right at rush hour or not early in the morning. So I would find it the best opportunity and then plan my time around that. So it was an hour to an hour and a half to get to the appointment. There was then the prep. You'd sit and wait for half an hour. Then you would go through the test itself, and then you had to wait as a post, just review and check up and make sure that it's okay, and away you go. So you're looking at a half a day to a day, depending on where you're coming from. And for some people I know that I met through the trials, they had their partners who had to do the driving, and so it was a 2-person commitment. That's a big commitment, and it's important that people recognize the research value of what you're doing is huge, because now they're seeing inside of your brain and figuring out some connections between your disease and the medication that you're taking by doing that and comparing it with hundreds and hundreds of other people. I find that very, very interesting and helpful, and I was actually able to see some of the results of my own study. It's not like I can keep that data, but I was able to benefit from just seeing how I compare to many, many other people. And that's really, really interesting, and it's helpful. It gives me positive feelings about the fact that I, A, have contributed, and B, I actually think I'm in better shape than I thought I was. I'm not so bad as I could have been. It could have been much worse. And the pictures are very helpful from that perspective. It gives you a clear sense of where you are in the bigger system that's being studied.
So one thing that we've noted here over the years is that sometimes it's hard to make the decision to be part of a clinical trial, but often when people do make that decision, they do one research trial and that research trial ends and they say, when can I do the next one? So we have several people who have gone through several. One of the gentlemen that's here today getting his IV, he's a professional research trial patient. He's, I believe, on his 3rd clinical trial, and he interestingly was on a cruise about a year ago, and he's sitting at the table with strangers, and he is telling the people at the table that he has Alzheimer's disease, and so that, you know, if he repeated himself or forgot something, they said to excuse him. But then he proceeded to say that he was participating in a clinical drug trial. And lo and behold, the neuroscientist lead on that international clinical trial was sitting at his table and said, I am so happy. You have no idea how much we appreciate your contribution. So that was just a very neat situation. So as I mentioned, we have lots of people who do it once and then they do it again. So John, after your experience of participating in a trial from start to finish, Would you do it again if you had the opportunity?
Yeah, I would jump on the first opportunity that I could be given. I don't have any sense of loss or risk. I see all of the research that's being done as very, very positive and helpful. I have benefited, I'm sure, immensely more than I appreciate already from it. It's given me confidence and comfort and a sense of how to go forward instead of sitting feeling discouraged. I'm looking at the new opportunities and becoming aware of opportunities, and I get to come to the Kawartha Centre once a month, and this is a very lovely place to come and be treated. It is not like a doctor's office, as I said.
And I like when John comes because he recommends good wine and good books.
Yes, well, that's part of a happy life.
There you go. There you go. So I'm just going to move on a little bit here. So first off, I just want to say, like, there is still so much work to be done to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease. And that, as both John and I have said, without these clinical trials, the field just can't move forward, and we need volunteers to do that. So participating in this research offers individuals an opportunity to contribute to the future, but they're also receiving benefits in the present. And the point I also really just wanted to get across is that we're a local option that a lot of people don't know of. So, you know, if anything that John or I have said today strikes a chord with you, share that information with others, so that people know that we are here, that we are doing this big research, and you know, if you're concerned, to give us a call. That being said, it's not for everybody. Research is not for everybody. So, you know, just in terms of healthy aging, just remember to take your medications as prescribed, reduce your alcohol consumption, quit smoking, make sure that you're looking after your hearing, exercise, physical exercise, cognitive stimulation, socializing daily, and eating a good diet are absolutely necessary to keep your cognition as stable as possible. So this is just another program that we often recommend to people. It's called the Activate Your Brain, but it's the same thing. 8 pillars of brain health: stay active, eat well, sleep well, exercise your brain, connect with family and friends, relax and reduce stress, and control risk factors, and get involved in research. So there's some great, if you just Google Activate Your Brain, spelled like it is in the title, they have some great suggestions and ideas for these various pillars. So I'll leave this on the screen so that people can write it down. But if you or someone you know is interested in participating, you can give us a call, and we can talk about the process. So you can contact myself, Jill MacPhee, or my colleague Sandra Trudell, and we can provide you with more information and let you know about any options available. And before we turn it over to questions, I just want to thank you so much, John. I think that's important for people to hear from somebody who's experiencing the trial. So we're good for if anybody has any questions or comments. Oh, I see one there. Evelyn, you'll need to unmute. Can we unmute her, Shelby, or do you need to do that?
Yes, I can try. Evelyn. It doesn't seem to be.
Evelyn, are you able to press on mute on your screen?
There, how's that?
There we go.
I guess one question we have is there an age limit to these trials?
There is. So every trial is a little bit different. So we have some trials that are as low as age 50 and some that go up to age 90. But it depends on the specific clinical trial.
And just a general question, something that I learned a question to ask from the SARS event. Is there international cooperation on sharing information, or does each institution want to be the one to get the best results?
No, this is we are one player in a big pond. So we are not the ones who are analyzing the information. We are gathering the information, and it's given internationally and then shared.
So it's all shared. Okay.
Well, it's shared. I mean, the drug trials, while they're happening, are blinded. So there are various time points with which the information is released. So as results become available and can be publicly shared, they're publicly shared. But during the main part of the trial, while they're gathering the information, even we don't get a lot of results other than if there's any safety concerns.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Audrey, did you have a question there?
No, I just unmuted myself. You are connected with the GAIN clinic as well, correct?
So yes, in terms of we're all part of the same geriatric division, and the doctors that work here are also working at GAIN. So Peterborough and area have, I guess there's actually 7 geriatricians in total are working in our geriatric network, which would be covering like Northumberland, Lindsay, Oshawa, and Peterborough. So there's 7 geriatricians, and 5 of those geriatricians are working both here and the GAIN clinic.
And I understand Peterborough probably is a bit ahead in that also at the university now. We've got, is it courses or?
Yeah, so we're very lucky to have the Trent Centre on Aging. And they're doing a lot of non-drug related research. We are really unbelievably fortunate. When I go to these conferences, these large international conferences, and look at a community the size of Peterborough and surrounding area and the resources we have any idea how fortunate we are
compared to other areas.
I'm part of the Retired Teachers of Ontario, and we've given a grant, I believe, this year to the Trent Centre on Aging. And I know from being a member of it for a while now that the number of geriatricians is far lower in Canada and so on than potentially Sweden, is it? And those countries. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. And we definitely have more per capita in our area than the rest of the country. And we do not have enough for the amount of seniors that we have.
Right.
Not enough.
But it's a really interesting area for sure, because the brain is such a complex organ.
Sure is. It sure is. Thank you. Any other questions?
Can I do one more? So 100 drugs were tried and they failed. So people that are in these tests, obviously they failed because either they didn't have success or they might have had side effects. If you're going along and you're feeling these side effects, do they stop the trial?
Yeah, so that's a really, really great question. So by the time the drug trials come to us, we do phase 2 and phase 3 trials. So they've already developed what's called a safety profile, so anticipated side effects. So when someone starts the trial, we go through a very rigorous consent form where we talk about all the potential side effects, okay? And then we are monitoring those side effects extremely closely, okay? So I'll give you I think an example may be the best way. We have a drug trial right now that is a tablet, a pill, and people have to take it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. And there is quite a number of people they expect to experience nausea in that first couple of months on that drug. They started at a low dose and slowly creep it up to try to prevent that. But it is a known side effect. So we are monitoring those people very closely, working with them to mitigate any symptoms if they have them, because often if you can just stick with it for a little bit, you're okay. But there's obviously a point with which, well, this is not okay. We don't want someone who is losing weight that maybe didn't have a whole lot of weight to lose or whatever. So we have one lady in that trial that it became clear that once she got to the second highest dose, that it just wasn't in her best interest. So we stopped it. So your safety is always number one. And now that individual, that lady has agreed to continue to participate in the study without the trial drug for its duration, because they can continue to collect the blood work and the cognitive testing. And so it's almost like she then becomes treated like she's in the placebo arm. So she's still contributing to the research without getting the actual drug. So absolutely, we have people's safety is number one. So we're monitoring very closely for the side effects. And if it's a minor side effect that's going to pass and people are comfortable, then, you know, they can push through. In that same trial, we had a couple we had one gentleman, every morning his coffee, just the smell of it really bothered him, but he pushed through for a couple of weeks and that nausea dissipated and he's doing great. So yeah, safety is number one. And if it's not the right fit, then we'll pull you out. Anybody who participates, the way I always try to frame it when I'm doing consent form is that the day that you sign up, your intention is to follow it through till the end. That's just your intention. But life happens. So if the drug is making you feel worse, then you're going to come out. Personal things happen. Your adult child gets sick, or your spouse gets sick, and it's not the right decision for you, then we're going to pull you out. When you sign up for research, you're signing up as a volunteer, so you can pull out at any time. If we feel it's not in your best interest, we can say, look, Evelyn, this I know you really want to follow this through, but we don't feel like this is in the best interest for you. So we can pull you out. And then of course, if in general the drug fails, so they do interim analysis to look at safety and efficacy. So is there too many side effects, or is it working? And if they go, look, we thought people were going to improve by this amount, or people were going to stay stable, but there's no difference between the placebo and the drug group, they're not going to continue working on that drug. So the study can stop the drug. So there's all sorts of reasons why people would stop. So I go back to the intention is follow through. But from our perspective here at Kawartha Centre, you as the individual participating, is your safety and your quality of life is number one.
Thank you.
Anything else?
If you've never been to the Kawartha Centre, just come and visit.
Sure.
It's worth the trip. Just come and say hello. I'm doing that as a volunteer. I'm not. This is
Yeah,
she's gonna hit me later, but that's okay. It's a beautiful, lovely, lovely place to visit, and it'll make you feel comfortable.
I did not prompt John on that. I did not prompt John on any of his answers. I just gave him a list of questions.
Yep, here's my questions.
So when did the Kawartha Centre start, and how many employees? I missed that. You said there were 3 at first.
So Dr. Ingram started the memory clinic, I believe in 98 or 99, and she was located at 555 George Street, in a small little office that had her and a receptionist and a nurse. And while she was there, in the early 2000s, she was approached to do research, and she started doing a trial, and she hired 2 women to do the cognitive testing on that, and that was trial number 1. And then it just started to grow, and in in 2004, she purchased the building on Brock Street, one half of the building on Brock Street. She hired a few more people. I started in 2009, and now it's so Dr. Katie Krause and Dr. Sarah Brisbane and myself actually took over the research business from Dr. Ingram in January of last year. Dr. Ingram is still working here as called a sub-investigator on the clinical trials, but the rest of us are sort of managing the organization. And right now we have the 5 geriatricians, and we have 4 nurses, 2 occupational therapists, 2 pharmacists, 2 lab technicians, 2 receptionists. We have 1 individual. She does like all of the regulatory and contract work with the pharmaceutical companies for the drug trials, and we have an office manager. So what started as 3 is now close to 20.
Wow, it's impressive.
Thank you.
Are there any last questions for Jill or for John as we approach 11:30? I can't quite see everyone's faces, but it sounds we've had a lot of great questions so far. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So I do. Oh,
Thank you very much for asking us to speak, and thank you to John for joining me. It's nice to share what we do.
Yeah, we're happy. I was really happy to get a chance to say a little bit from a patient's point of view.
Yes, so we are so pleased to have you and to learn about even that graphic about the number of drugs that's being trialed was so eye-opening, and all the phases that they need to go through, and to know that you know, the Kawartha Centre for Redefining Aging that's local is involved in so much of that is just so wonderful to have that available to us, and to learn about the things to consider, the benefits, you know, your experience, John, you know, that was so great to hear your lived experience with not only the trials, but the staff, the environment at the Kawartha Centre. It was really great to hear all of that. So you're welcome to come back anytime. We're happy to have you. And if there are any questions that come up after the fact, Jill put up her contact information. If we weren't able to jot that down, you can connect with Chris or myself. We can definitely help make that connection with Jill. And we also have this recording available, so we'll send that to you, Jill, as well, so that you have that available to you as well. So thank you again for joining us today. That was so eye-opening and informative. And I know some of our staff are on the call as well, and I think that will help them to explain more about clinical trials to our clients as well. And we have a bunch of thank yous coming in as well on the chat for John sharing your experience and Jill for sharing the wonderful information. So with that said, we will conclude today's virtual education, and I think we're back again talking about preparing for the holidays on Tuesday, December 5th. So if you're interested, we will be back then, and you can register online, or again, connect with us to register. So thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.